Welcome back to the Jewish Futurism Lab, where we unpack Torah, tech, and tomorrow. I'm your host, Mike Wirth, Jewish futurist, community artist, and design educator, coming to you from Crown Town, Charlotte, North Carolina. Today, I'm sitting down with Professor Douglas Rosenberg. Doug is a Jewish artist and professor at University of Wisconsin at Madison, and the former director of the Connie Project on Jewish arts, and a kid who grew up in the Bay Area and became a screendance theorist. He's an amazing filmmaker, and today we're going to talk about Ingmar Bergman maybe being a rabbi, but really we're going to talk about what Jewish art is. Let's get into it, y'all. All right, friends, welcome back to the lab. Super excited about today's interview. Got to sit down with a legendary Jewish artist and filmmaker, Douglas Rosenberg. And Doug is somebody who's just been such a wonderful mentor and help in my Jewish art career. And he's just been so much fun to talk to. He loves art. He loves discourse. He loves learning. He loves dance. And we just had the greatest conversation. The whole time here, I'm trying to talk about his brand new film that's going around the world called The Sea by Douglas Rosenberg. You should look it up. It's on Vimeo. And it's an amazing black and white film. It's an homage to Ingmar Bergman, if you know Ingmar Bergman's great films of the 60s and 70s. Wow, it's like the Island series, if you know what that's about. So really, really cool. And about a film about men in their third age of their life, right? I'm not quite there yet, but something that Doug really is passionate about. But before we even start to even talk about that, we get absolutely sidetracked and go on this amazing discussion tangent about what is really Jewish art, like what makes Jewish art Jewish, right? All those great questions. And Doug's just got a great soul and just so much fun to talk to. So without further ado, here's my interview with Douglas Rosenberg. First of all, Doug, welcome. The amazing Douglas, Professor Douglas Rosenberg. Are you Dr. Rosenberg?
No.
Okay, you're MFA like me? All right, cool.
Yep.
Nice. All right, so Professor, right? Douglas Rosenberg, currently at UW Madison. And good friend of mine. We've done conferences and we collaborated on an interview for AJS, which was super cool. So now I put you in the hot seat and I'm going to ask you questions today. And oh my gosh, doing research on you, I was like, oh man, he's done so much cool stuff. Mm-hmm. So we might have to do like Star Trek, The Next Generation, a two-parter, and get you to come back to talk about some of the rabbit holes of things and great scholarship you have. But yeah, Doug, welcome. We're excited to dig in with our guests into their origin story, like good superheroes. And you grew up Jewish in the Bay Area, right? Mm-hmm. At the tail end of the Beat era, which is, man, that sounds like the coolest time. And you were around things like protest culture and counterculture. From your vantage point, what did that world feel like, and how did that mix kind of make your life animate?
Yeah, it's interesting because at some point in the not too distant past, it occurred to me that 67, 68, 69, if I'm remembering right, 67 was the summer of love in San Francisco. 68 was my bar mitzvah, and 69 was the moon landing. And I may have those slightly off, but I'm pretty sure that's very close to the chronology. But it occurred to me one day that occurred to me out of the blue one day when I was teaching a class or something. And I realized, I don't think I was conscious of what was going on at the time, but I don't think I was totally conscious as I got older about what that moment was. I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in north of San Francisco, a little town called San Anselmo. The synagogue that we went to was a Reform synagogue called Rodef Shalom. It was started, as I understand it, by a small group of Jewish folks who didn't have a shul, and got together, as I understand it, in my grandparents' apartment building, apartment house, and they met regularly for some time to raise money and figure out what the community wanted, what it needed, and then ultimately they built this beautiful, really beautiful mid-century modern, 1956, I think it opened, shul that I grew up in, and unfortunately, about 5 or 6 or maybe 10 years ago now, I don't even know, they outgrew it and they tore it down, and it broke my heart because a lot of memories. It was a really small, very cool mid-century place, and yeah, so that's gone, but they rebuilt on the same land, I guess. But yeah, that's where I grew up in that time period. I just recently went out. My first art teacher in middle school, which was in that time period of around 1968, 1969. I walked into art class on the first day of 7th grade and saw this guy with long hair and a beard and kind of George Harrison glasses or John Lennon glasses, I guess, and macrame belt, the whole thing.
Wow.
And he said, "Well, we're gonna, in this class, we're gonna make art, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that," and it just changed my life, completely changed my life. And I just recently, I've stayed in touch with him since then. He's in his 80s now, and I just recently did an oral history with him about 2 or 3 months ago. Went out to California to sit with him and his wife, who also she was my English teacher in high school. She was a former dancer from New York, and he was this artist who was on his second job ever, I think, at that point. And he just rocked our world. It was quite a time. I mean, we did a lot of stuff. I know I'll stop after this, but I have this conversation often with people. The stuff that we were allowed to do in the 60s in California, people would get arrested for now. Like if you let your kids go home with a teacher, your 7th grade teacher, let you go to his house for dinner, or
No.
we're doing a kind of outdoor firing, by yourself at night, burning things, and it just wouldn't go. But
No.
that's how we were raised in that time period.
That's wild. So was there like any movie cameras in your house as a kid? And like how was cinema kind of what was the culture like in your home?
Well, when I was a kid, no, we very few pictures actually. I, I'm always amazed at how few pictures were around, the family and stuff. Um, my dad was a lithographer. He was a union lithographer.
Wow.
He'd come back from his dad was an immigrant. His folks were immigrants from Eastern Europe. Came to San Francisco. My dad grew up in San Francisco, and then at 17 joined the Navy right after, I guess it was right after Pearl Harbor or thereabouts. And then when he came back from the Navy, he used the GI Bill to go to the San Francisco Art Institute, which was at that time called the California College of Art, I think,
Oh wow.
something like that. It had a lot of great people teaching there. Richard Diebenkorn, all these great people taught there then.
Yeah. Bay Area movement
Yeah.
folks. Yeah.
So then he got an apprenticeship as a lithographer and learned lithography, and that's what he did for the rest of his life. But he was a wood carver. He was trained like really classically, and so he carved extraordinarily well and beautiful things. I would always go downstairs in his workshop and carve stuff. So there was, I was around some things. He was quite taken with mid-century modern art, and particularly, he wasn't a really he was a conflicted Jewish guy, I think, of his generation.
Hmm.
He always wore a Star of David around his neck, like very visibly, that 1970s style,
Yeah.
Uh, but
Over chest hair.
yeah, exactly. But he didn't particularly go to shul or practice anything. But he told the stories about being in the Navy on this little boat in the South Pacific, and these other Jewish guys that were on the boat were just he described them as I don't know what language he used, but the gist was that they couldn't take care of themselves. They were afraid of everything. And my dad was a boxer. He boxed in the Navy, and so my dad was always taking care of these guys. And he really didn't. He really hated that they were so kind of weak and unable to take care of themselves. So he really gravitated toward this kind of the tough Jew legend. The
Mm.
guys that founded.
Murder Inc. and Meyer Lansky and
Yep.
yeah,
They,
Bugsy Siegel, right?
yep. Sunset Strip, all those guys. So he really kind of had that persona.
Wow.
Um, but he was an artist. We didn't have movie cameras really in house until I went to high school,
Mm.
and then I had a teacher, a guy named Archie Williams. I'll tell you who he was in a minute. But went to high school. I went to an alternative high school within the high school. It was called School Within a School. So it was California in the 60s and early 70s, already pretty, you know, progressive. And
Nice.
they set up this special school to be even more progressive inside the regular school. So I went
Yeah.
there.
I went to Votech. That's what it evolved into
Yeah,
eventually.
cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and so we had teachers there who had worked with, um, who had been sort of part of the happenings and
Mm.
the early
The,
days
the
of
beatnik happenings.
performance art, stuff like that. And it was just a free for all. I mean, the stuff that we got to do was crazy. Um, but in that same time frame, I had a teacher, Archie Williams, who one day said to the class, "Hey, I got these cameras. I got Super 8 cameras. I got
Wow.
this video camera just came out.
Yeah, brand new tech.
Touch this stuff, use it. It's there." So me and this other kid said, "Yeah, we want to do that," and we did. We started going out making crazy films, stuff like that, like the kind you could imagine.
Mm.
Um, and that was the first time I got my hands on something like that. But to Archie Williams, that finished that story was his story was that he was an Olympic runner who
Mm.
happened to be on the relay team in the 1936 Olympics in
Oh,
Germany,
yeah.
famous Olympics where America won
The
the relay,
Jesse
all
Owens.
black relay squad. And if you ever watch, what's her name's movie, Triumph of the Will, Leni Riefenstahl's film,
Oh,
Triumph of
yeah.
the
Saw
Will.
that in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever go back to it, one of the guys on that relay squad was Archie Williams. So heroic guy, got out of the army and went to school, got his engineering degree, I think it was, and then nobody would hire him. Couldn't get a job as an engineer, so he became a public school teacher, and I had him as my teacher. And when he mentioned these cameras to us, I don't know if I made the connection until much later, but he had one day, he was a math teacher too. I should have said that in the beginning. So this is the math teacher who one day rolls a TV in on a cart and plays this film for us, which was Triumph of the Will.
He
So
showed you that in school? Wow.
we're a freshman in high school, and we're watching Triumph of the Will.
14-year-old kids.
No,
Wow.
no real understanding why we were watching that, except years later I remembered vaguely that, oh yeah, he was in that movie. He's the
Oh.
guy in the movie, so I guess he was showing a movie that was like to some extent about him, his life experience.
So was he the loser in that film? Were they trying to show the German runners were faster than him in that?
Oh, they won. the U.S. Olympic relay team with Jesse Owens, a bunch of famous guys, and Archie Williams beat the Germans. They won the gold, and Hitler very famously wouldn't acknowledge them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that guy was my high school teacher, high school math teacher.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, and who was the dancer in the house? Was there one?
No, there wasn't. My
Uh,
mom was a beautician. Um,
well, you can kind of call that dancing, you're on
yeah,
your feet a lot.
no, she wasn't a dance person at all.
Hmm.
And I should say that by the time I was a junior in high school, my family had blown up. My mom had moved
Hmm.
out. It was, not a good time, not a good situation.
Oh,
Um,
I get that
that
too,
was,
man. Yeah.
yeah, that was about 1974, 75, which happened to coincide. All these things I have kind of put together since, but
Mhm.
coincided with the beginning of the feminist movement, of which my mom was, if not an official member, at least someone for whom it meant a lot. Feminism
Mm.
meant a lot. So yeah, the family had blown up by then, and I was kind of on my own. And after I got out of high school, I left home right away and went out in the world working and stuff. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s that somebody I think I met a girl who was taking modern dance classes, and
Mm.
showed me some pictures, or maybe took me took me to a modern dance concert, I think. And then I went to a few more, and I started to think, oh, this is interesting. And as I looked around, I had a lot of book. I read a lot about contemporary art at that time and stuff. There were a lot of artists who were visual artists who were collaborating with dancers and musicians, and leftover from the beatnik era, but in this new sort of uh, modernist moment, I guess. And that's
You mean like a Merce Cunningham type of?
exactly Merce
Yeah.
Cunningham, Cage, um,
Yep. John Cage, like Black Mountain.
Black
Uh,
Mountain, 9 Evenings in New York, or
yeah, Nine
EAT,
Evenings.
Experiments in Art and Technology. All that stuff just like blew my mind. And so then I really started purposefully kind of going to see things and trying to get myself involved in some of those things.
That's so cool. So what kind of came on the horizon first for you? Um, when you were uh, in college, was that sort of when you were
Yes.
around?
I didn't go to I didn't go to I went to art school uh, in the 80s. I was 32 already by then. I went to
Oh,
community college for a long time. After I left home, it was kind of, I didn't have much support or guidance, and kind of
yeah.
worked as a carpenter for literally for 20 years after that. But
And where'd you live? Were you still in the
yeah, yeah,
Bay Area? Yeah.
yeah, yep. I lived there for the most part till I moved to Wisconsin for this job that I have now. Um,
Wow.
what was the question? Sorry.
Uh, no real question. We're kind of just trying to get the sense of like how the forces in your life are
Oh yeah, yeah,
forming you and creating your mind and putting you on a track,
right.
that you eventually study. Right. So when you get back to school, what brings you back to school and makes you go, all right, I got
Yeah,
something here.
no, I can tell you exactly. So I went to this community college for on and off for a long time because it was $50 for all you could take, everything you want to take,
That's
$50.
awesome.
Yeah, it was like 78. I get out of school 70. I got 75. It was like 76, 78, 76, 77, 78. Yeah, it was a local community college. It had great teachers, great facilities, and I started going to school there, taking classes, but not like, I didn't take a degree track. I just took the classes I wanted to take. So I took like psychology, and I took ceramics, and I took uh, theater, whatever. So one thing led to another. Um, and in that time period, that's absolutely true. Sorry, I happened to go see this play called Waiting for Godot.
Wow.
Yeah,
That little play.
at a community college. I went and saw it, and I thought, oh my God, again, like what do I do with this? So I went back and saw it again, and then again I started connecting dots, like how does he do that? How does that happen? Um, and at some point, I'm gumming things up, but I had really got invested in clay, working in clay. Um, and
Hmm.
I went to Japan to study for a little while. And when I came back, I just thought, no, clay's not the thing for me. Um, and at that point, uh, started taking dance classes. I was working as a carpenter with a guy who was also a dancer, and he took me to a dance class.
Wow.
And it was hugely humiliating.
Yeah.
I had no
Did you do it in
experience.
your boots?
No, but I did it. No, but I did it in my tights, and I did it with a bunch of
Ah,
9-year-old boys because I was a complete beginner in my 20s, and these kids had, been dancing already for who knows how long. So, I realized that's probably not going to be me. I'm interested in this, and then I found another teacher who was a local Bay Area woman who who I started taking modern dance classes with. That was totally
hmm.
different than ballet, much freer. And once I got into sort of that space, then I thought, oh, okay, now I get it. Like these people are the kind of people that are collaborating with these artists and stuff. And I approached that teacher and I said, I'm probably not gonna. I don't know how I said it, but essentially what I said was, I've got these ideas about combining video with dance and scenic things and all these things, that I by that time become aware with. And I really, would you be interested in doing that, collaborating with me? And she was pretty successful already. And I think she very graciously said, yeah, sure, let's try something. And
Yeah.
and we did. And
Oh,
we ultimately started getting attention for that work. And we ended up at the American Dance Festival in the early 80s, commissioned work there that used quite a few video monitors and projections, and in the early days of projection, and of course dance, and that led to me working with the American Dance Festival for the next 20 years. Every summer I went down there and I taught workshops and I did video work for dance and all this stuff, and so I got to work with everybody who came through, a lot of extraordinary people. So that led me really more deeply into working with dance and film and performance. By the time I went to art school, so, all these things happen for who knows why, but I applied to the sculpture area in art for San Francisco Art Institute, and they said, we're not accepting you in sculpture, but we have this new area called video performance. And
ah.
I said,
Was
sounds
that one
great.
of the new genres that that
It was,
SFAI is famous for?
yeah, new genres.
Majors?
They ditched the name and replaced it with new genres. Yeah, but I was first or second year of that program, and I didn't really quite know exactly what it was, but it sounded great to me. I'm happy to go, and it was pretty wild, pretty wild. So
Man,
yeah, yeah,
that's super cool. And then uh gosh, and you've kind of gone into these like many different pathways that combine uh, film and dance, right? Kinetics, motion, how to shoot, and you also have a tremendous love for cinema. I mean, the movies you've put out, we're going to talk about
yeah,
The Sea, but also your wife, right?
yeah,
Um, she is also like such an accomplished creative and dancer and choreographer herself.
yeah.
And I saw the interview y'all did on Wisconsin PBS
Oh yeah,
for the Song of Songs and the 12, or what is it, the solos, seven solos.
solos. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
remarkable stuff.
Well,
And
I met Chao Ping is her name. I met her at the American Dance Festival the second or third year I was there. She had come down to take classes there, and um, we've been together ever since. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, she's an extraordinary choreographer and a filmmaker. Also makes her own films. Um, and we collaborated for quite quite a number of years on live live work, uh, live kind of dance performance work in the Bay Area, um, and then moved here. I think in like 1991 or so, moved to Wisconsin. I followed her here. She had a job offer to teach here, and
Ah,
I followed along. And then I eventually got hired a couple years later.
fantastic. Right. I was going to say, like, what a temperature difference. When I came up for the Connie conference, coming from Charlotte to Wisconsin, even in March, I couldn't, I was frozen to the bone. Like it's that cold, even in those early spring
Ah,
months. Um, I don't
I'm
know how you do it, Doug. I don't know how you do it.
big Jack.
A big jacket. I had a big jacket. It didn't work. But clearly you've got this, you've mastered this like multidisciplinary practice, which I love because like I'm a Parsons grad, so
Oh, really? I didn't
I'm
know that.
yeah, I went 2001 to 2003 for the design and technology, which is
Oh,
also a generalist's
yeah.
haven because I worked with all kinds of great people, a lot of video artists included. Uh, so I love you had said in a something I had read that I think it was one of your chair's letters as the chair at where your position now is talking about art as a continuum, and that like having these multifaceted approaches
Mhm.
as part of your practice is not like buckshot. It's not scattered. It's actually quite a focused choreography um, of, uh, of discovery, which I thought like, wow, like that's such a great thing. And you reference, Dadaism, Bauhaus, Futurism. These are things I really connected with. Um, and you know, uh, how are you thinking about that still? Like when you talk about being that a gem, right? A multifaceted type of creator.
Well, coincidentally, I just came, before this, I was just at a my Pilates class, and I ran into a woman there who's about my generation or so, who's a filmmaker of some note, and she was just saying, she she retired from teaching, but she was saying that she asked me literally an hour ago. She said, what do you do with these kids? I try to teach them how how things are interconnected. She taught film for a long time, and she said how film is connected to the visual arts and music and dance, and how these things are all of a piece. And she said they just don't get it. And I said, I know exactly what you're talking about. I said, prior to, I think, I have a theory about this. Prior to the end of World War II, the arts were always interdisciplinary. The whole of the 20th century. This, like you just mentioned, those successive movements that you just, Dada, Futures, all those things. Each one of those was about putting the previous movement to rest, and um, replacing it with some other new idea of what the future is. And all of that goes on and on and on until we get to uh, Alan Caprow. Alan Caprow's work, writing?
Mm-mm.
All right,
Oh,
here we go.
teach us. Here we go.
So Alan Caprow, Jewish guy from New York. You've heard of the happenings?
Yep.
So Alan Caprow is in New York in the 50s. He's part of that crowd, that era, that time frame. He's making art, and he comes to the West Coast, and he gets a teaching job at San Diego, I think, UC San Diego, and he starts teaching, and he's coming up with this idea of blurring the boundaries between performer and viewer, between artist and receiver, between inside outside, between one material designation and another. It's like suddenly he just has this idea, which comes actually from a guy named John Dewey, but that's another story. But Caprow is the one who starts making these these kind of really open-ended performative pieces called happenings. And if you read, there's a book of his collected essays that take place over about 20, 30 years. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's collected essays of Alan Capro. And if you read his thinking, there's an article in that, I think it's the last article in the book, that's called The Meaning of Art. And he tells the story in the book, whether it's true or made up, not clear, but he tells a story about a guy who is going table to table at a restaurant asking for people to give him money for food, and everybody's ignoring him, and he finally goes to a table, and the guy at the table says, all right, I'll give you something if you can tell me what the meaning of life is. And the guy says, oh, that's easy, it's the hole in the middle of a bagel. And I got to this essay and I thought, I knew it. And then I started reading more about Capra. Capra was brought up in a Hasidic or not Hasidic Orthodox household in New York. He knew this stuff inside and out. And then you start thinking about, oh, well, what were the happenings? What was all this stuff? And it opens up this whole possibility, for one, to think about the contributions of Jewish intellectuals throughout the 20th century, which I've been doing for a long time, which led to the Connie Conference. And you find people like Alan Capro, and you find people like Eva Hess, and you find, I could just go on forever. Meredith Monk, on and on and on. So I'll stop there because I could go on forever about that.
Well, I want to attend that lecture. I mean, that sounds absolutely incredible. I love to get down on that art historical legacy. I brought it up because I totally agree. With that, I think it's an essential part of what I'm describing as Jewish futurism. As I'm manifesting that more from just being art into really an understanding of its existence in Judaism already. And for you, there's got to be something that how do you dashboard all those art methods, Doug? Is there something that houses? Is it film for you? Does film, like you're saying, early in the 20th century, and I think coming from the 19th century, opera and theater were really like the vehicles before film that carried all the arts, right?
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Gesamtkunstwerk, right? Wagner's great German phrase.
Wagner's container, but also the Futurist manifesto. If you read their manifesto, they talk about taking painting and blowing it up into 4 dimensions. That's what the new art would be. So there's this whole history of this. I think I mentioned until the Second World War. And I want to go back to that because I think what happened, and I think it's true, after the Second World War, people had the GI Bill. Soldiers had the GI Bill. My dad did. I mentioned that. And they were coming back to go to school, and the universities saw these people coming, and they started creating degree courses that were to a certain extent vocational. But art was not peripheral to those courses. Art was fairly central. So art, for my father, was lithography, but it could have been mural painting, or it could have been, any other number of things, design, whatever it was. And so when people started going to schools to study art in a degree program, which many of the mid-century artists didn't do. Many of those artists weren't doing that. So they weren't getting this kind of pedagogy that said, oh, art should be siloed into these discrete, materially based spaces, right? Suddenly they're getting these degree programs. So they're splitting off into, you want to be a painter? You want to be a sculptor? You want to be a whatever, fill in the blank. And that is really when we start to get very far away from what had happened before.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, yes. That's a rabbit hole. I'm so tempted. See, that's our continuation. That's the alternate reality that we'll clip right there and come back to for another episode. Because I want to ask you about your work with the Connie conference, and your big question, right? Like, is there Jewish art?
Yeah,
Sorry, I always have to say it like that because it's the way it's written.
yeah,
Um, and you've become director of the Connie project, and your role is the named Vilas professorship. But the Connie project's now concluded, right? As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I was at the last one. That was great, man. It was great. And what's next? Is there anything kind of Connie evolution or
well,
spin-off series?
I mean, to be completely frank about that, maybe we've had this conversation. I don't remember, but that wasn't my choice to end the Connie project. That
I
was
know.
I was uh, you know that went for about 20 years, and
Yeah.
the way it started was that my recollection is that I was brand new in Jewish studies. I was uh, you the Jewish studies faculty was made up of people who taught in other disciplines, and
Mm.
so if you were accepted into the Center for Jewish Studies, then your tenure home was still where it was. So mine was still in art. So somebody, whoever was chair at the time, said, "Hey, there's this thing. Somebody wants to give us some money, but it has to be earmarked for the Jewish arts. And is anybody interested in that?" And nobody had anything to say because nobody was interested in that. And I, threw my hand up and I said, "Well, I'll take that. I'll do that. I'm interested in
Yeah.
that." So, slightly long story, but I wrote up a curriculum and a bunch of proposals stuff, and they, with some trepidation, let me do that. And it just was, what you experienced was what every conference was like. People would leave feeling like, "Oh my God, I've, been to the promised land. I've met my people," you know?
True. It's true.
Um, and the more progressive I think the conference became, the more we delved into things that people weren't talking about in order to answer these questions that you and I've had. The less my colleagues liked it. It just
Oh
wasn't
no.
what they were interested in. And
Mm.
so I kept that at bay for like literally like about 18 or 20 years. And then that was it. That was, they pulled the plug. And the Connies both had passed away by then. It was, maybe it was time to end it. But anyway, what happened coincidentally from there was that I got a phone call or email or something from the people at the AJS journal, AJS magazine,
Yeah.
which wrote about your work in.
American Jewish Studies, right?
And they said, we need an arts editor for the magazine. Are you interested? And I said, well, only if I can do exactly what I want. You know, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to write about. And they said, yeah, sure, great. We'd love to change it up. That'd be great. And so I just finished about, I think, 4 years of that. So you rotate off, out of those positions after a while. And I don't know what they're going to do now, but I got the opportunity to these things that we've been talking about today, related to Jewishness in the arts. I got to write everything that I've been talking about for years. I got to kind of write it down. So I'm really happy with. I think I did 6 editions of that magazine. So I wrote a lot about the things we're talking about right now. And the thing that you mentioned, is there a Jewish art? Just to again clarify these things, that was a phrase from a paper by Harold Rosenberg, the scholar Harold Rosenberg, art historian. No relation, but it was written in, I believe, 1955 or 6, I think, and he had given a series of lectures, at least this one in particular, that was on the topic of Jewish art. And that's another, again, we can dig into that another time, whatever. But that there are these powerhouse critics in the mid-century, um, uh, Harold Rosenberg, Clement Greenberg, Meyer Shapiro, Susan Sontag. Names should sound very familiar. All Jewish thinkers who were writing about art and framing the future of art in the same way the futurists did. They were framing the future of art for people like Helen Frankenthaler and all the
Yeah.
other Jewish members of abstract expressionism to take their cues from. It's a really compelling story, which I'm always surprised more people haven't written about it. But yeah.
Well, you got me interested. I mean, I was so excited, uh, that like early on that you guys had connected to Klebat.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Norman
just
Cleveland.
yeah, like what a career uh, he had. I mean, wow. Um,
I just actually put those books back on my shelf. The two from those. Let me get them here. Hold on. So I
yeah, I
don't
see.
know what I was
Love it,
going to
Doug.
say. Um, yeah. So two shows that he did, important shows in New York in the '90s. One was
Yes,
two
Chaim Soutine. I went to as a kid. You get, oh my God.
two
Wow.
Jewish, and the second and that one they tried to shut down the people tried to pull their money. The city tried to shut it down. It was so
What?
controversial. And then that
Oh,
wasn't enough, so he did this one, Mirroring Evil.
oh, right, right. He let the people who used Nazi
Yeah.
symbolism to like explain themselves.
Well, he said, well, I wonder what the Jews think about this. I wonder what the Jewish artists might think about this. Yeah, I saw these shows and it just like blew my mind. And so, yeah, the very first Connie conference, it wasn't even the conference we did, it was a symposium before the conference came along. And I said, I got to get this guy Kleeblatt. So found his number, called him up. He goes, yeah, I'll come, you know. Yeah, it was
That's
amazing.
awesome. That's
But
so cool.
but
Yeah. When I,
he took all these things we're talking about, plus because he's an out gay man, Jewish guy, all those things, plus the sort of foray into what about the question of queer Jewish artists? Where do they sit in that?
mm,
What about those people in the Holocaust? And what about the artists who are making work that come from that part of the history? So
oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's way ahead of his time. That's something you'd be hearing now or within the last, 15 years of activism.
it was
Um,
so great. Yeah.
I mean, that's right there. I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool thing. So after 20 years, right, of the Biennales for Connie and like the magazines and all of this thinking and listening to people like me drone on for hours about why we think X, Y, or Z about Jewish art. Is there Jewish art? Have you concluded? Have you found some?
Well, I have some some thoughts.
Let it rip.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a real. I think the thing that we want to call Jewish art or a Jewish art is really bifurcated into two different camps. And I respect everybody for their opinions and their ideas, but I have a bias for one of those camps. And I'll tell you why. But so there's art in the service of Jewishness, art in the service of the religion, the Jewish religion, and the Jewish
Mhm.
people. Art that is intended to tell the stories, not that dissimilar from the way that Christian art functioned in
For sure.
another time period. And so that kind of work doesn't, for me, fit into, and maybe purposefully puts itself outside of what we might consider to be contemporary art. So, um, who am I trying to think of? Arthur Danto. I always use this quote. Arthur Danto. Somebody asked him like, "What is contemporary art?" And Arthur Danto thought about it. He said, contemporary art is that art made by our contemporaries. It's like a perfect philosophical response.
Right.
So who are our contemporaries? If you think about those, we don't really have these kind of manifesto-led movements anymore so much. But if you think about those things, which I think, I love that history. There's two different manifestos. One is art in the service of Jewishness, like I described before, and then one is art in service of art. And by art, I mean that thing that we might call contemporary art, that thing that sort of resonates throughout the history of all art, not just Jewish artists, but art by Jewish people. And then art, and in that side of the equation, artists whose Jewishness is simply a condition of their humanness, but not the thing that they're in service to over and above everything else. It's one of the conditions of their being human. So those two things are very different to me. And I think what Kleeblatt did in this show was to say, okay, there's artists out there who are artists, capital A artists, who are Jewish. Part of their humanness, their identity is that they are Jewish people. What kind of work are they making? Work that's sort of gotten traction in museums and galleries that do not particularly foreground religion or spirituality or Jewishness, etc. And then he put all that together, and that's what blew my mind, was to say, oh, yeah, this is what happens when a curator, a real curator, steps in and says, here's a theory, here's a thought, let's see what this might look like. So the other side of that, the kind of art for the sake of Jewishness, that's something that I find difficult. I love to engage with people who do that kind of work. I got to do one thing here. One more thing. For instance, Ben Schachter, right? Ben Schachter.
No.
Oh my God. Ben Schachter he was a keynote for Connie the year before you were there, maybe. He wrote this book, and it's one of the few books. It's called Image, Action, and Idea in Contemporary Jewish Art. It's one of the few books that really delves into art for the sake of art, which is made by Jewish people. So it's a great book, one of the few. But for the most part, there's this, how can I say it? There's a lot of groups that are quite active, as you know, around Jewish art, but I think it tends to a certain extent to homogenize Jewishness into something related to biblical narrative. That's a big generalization, and I'm sure people will be upset with me for that. But it's a different thing. So my question with the Connie conference was always, how can we talk about the Jewish contribution and the Jewish present in art from modernism onward in a way that doesn't belittle or make light of artists whose work leans more toward Judaica or biblical narratives or things like that. How do we have conversations about that? And I think it's been hard. It's still hard, I think, generally. But that, that's just my opinion. I think it's a great book. It's a big fat book by Oxford called The Oxford Handbook of Jewishness in Dance. And I was part of that. Do you know the book?
No, that sounds like an amazing book.
It is. There's like 40 authors and 30 authors or something. People with a relationship to dance. And I after like however many years it was of the Connie project, I had a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, particularly in this case as it relates to dance, because in the dance world, uh, you know, you couldn't turn around without running into a Jewish choreographer or Jewish dancer at the beginning, from the birth of modern dance. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stories to tell. I think a lot of things to talk
Yeah.
about.
Back to your dual uh, camp uh, statement earlier. Did anything ever kind of be an exception and find itself in the middle, like in a hybrid space that surprised you over the years?
Well, uh, I think the work in these catalogs that Klebats is for me is a real touchstone. There was a show at the Spertus Institute in Chicago uh, in the early '90s, and what was it called? I forget. I can't keep getting up to go to get the book, but I know it's behind. Um, there's the woman who curated that. I wrote about her uh, in some article or other in the AJS publication. I've quoted her a bunch.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I can't. I'm not going to be able to think of her name or the show, but that was another example of that kind of activist, in a way, kind of curation. But yeah, so out of the Connie conference came a lot of people. People like you, or people for whom I think people who have similar affinities to you in your work. People gravitated to that conference because they were those kind of people who were deeply Jewish, very much uh, out with their Jewish identity, but also who were making work that didn't follow necessarily the rules of Jewish. Uh,
Of halakha and minhagim,
yeah, sure,
right? Like a yeah.
all this, and I remember a couple different instances where people showed up who were queer, young queer people. That started to happen a lot throughout the conference. Young
Mm,
queer people who wanted to be able to participate at the highest level of practice and couldn't. They grew up, in families that wouldn't let them.
mm.
Very real stuff. And so they started making art about those experiences, and I think that made some people uncomfortable. But
Mm.
it excited me. I mean, I'm happy to hear. I've written about this idea that multiculturalism, starting in the '80s and moving on past that, sort of recognized all of the hybrid identities: Native American, African American, Japanese American. You could fill it in, and sort of one after the other, all of these groups came to the table and sort of exerted their right to be in this discussion about multiculturalism. And Jews stayed out of that discussion for a very, very long time,
Mm.
almost to the very end, and still not. I don't think we completely bought into it. But you know, uh, I think we have to be able to be in those discussions also. Things are pretty difficult these days, but in general, I think we have to be able to be in those discussions. I mean, I'll just give you one quick example. My wife is a Chinese American person. Her family immigrated from China. Our son, Jacob,
Mm.
uh, is mixed race kid who grew up. He went to religious school, got his bar mitzvah. He tutored Hebrew to bar mitzvah kids.
Mm.
He doesn't. I don't know how to read Hebrew,
Nice.
but if he and I walk into the room, I'm the one that gets recognized as Jewish, right?
Mm.
Just
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, so having lived through this, I think it's important for us to sort of have these discussions, keep having these discussions.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, if I could just kind of maybe respond to what you're unpacking here. I mean, I think in my space, my exploration, what you're describing the edges of here is our assimilation, right? Is that like a couple generations ago, when we were our families came in. I have a similar experience with uh, members of my family who came in the 19 teens, right, from Poland, from pogroms, lost everything there, like in those types of things. Couldn't get in because of American immigration quotas. My bubby lived in Cuba. Like I always wondered, my bubby spoke fluent Spanish, like and
The
Yiddish,
diaspora.
and it was just like, damn, that's amazing. So uh, yeah, I think that generation was hungry to assimilate and to gain status, and that meant becoming white, right? Which is now in the paradigm of the United States has a different value than it did 2 generations ago, right? So I think the Faustian deal of that trade of assimilation is we kind of lost that uh, that being another, like being another inside, like a stranger in a strange land, truly, because we accepted we were just a religion in the Western framework of Christianity. Anyway, like I think you know where I'm going with this, and I think that's a question, a crossroad. I think like Connie conference at least gave me the space to think about too. And I had conversations with people. It's like, where are we going? Like we're clearly in this kind of really cool uh, ground spurt, of creativity in the Jewish world, but where are we headed? And there seem to be a lot of Hydra heads, like of competing ambitions, so to speak. So I think like we need to learn again who we are and get in touch with that and wrestle with this assimilation hangover, so to speak. And I like to do that with my work, and try to take myself out. Like, what would it be if I were to return to indigenous ways, and it's like I just got over feeling saying that aloud, right? That like Jews are indigenous people. Because it's like, well, wait a minute. No, I was never put in that framework whenever discussing indigeneity in school, right? Were you? Right? Never.
No, but yeah, I have some things to say about that. I don't want to interrupt you though. So,
No, it's please say
well, this is I'm in my study right. I'm surrounded by all my books, so I keep pointing to places. But on that side over there, there's some books. All my Jewish
nice.
books are in there. But there's a couple books in there. One is called something. I think it's called "The March into Whiteness," and
Mm.
one I think is called "How Did Jews Become White Folks?" or "When Jews Become," something like that. And
Yes, yes.
these are not accidental things. Like we didn't, Jews didn't drift into whiteness. It
No,
you
right.
know the story.
Took a while. Right, of course.
It took a
Borscht
while.
Belt.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
very purposeful. The rabbis, the rabbinate, got together. International rabbinate got together and said, we want to be careful here because this old world look and the new world, it's not playing so well.
Mm.
We want to clean our act up. We want to get rid of the Kershaw's and to fill in and all that stuff. And maybe we just want to wear a nice little, you know, what do you call it?
Scarf or
Yeah,
talit. Yeah.
nice tallis. Yeah, nice talit. And maybe we want to make our rituals look a little bit more like our Christian neighbors. This is not. I'm not making this up. This is, historic, coming out of the Holocaust, but even before then. Um, that's what assimilation was. But then we can talk about this or not talk about stuff. It's your podcast, but you
Yeah.
know, I just heard someone. I was watching someone interviewed about the sort of the Israel Jewish thing, the thing that's going on now,
Oh, yeah.
and I know this term. I've heard this term, but I never heard anyone deploy it in the recent time to describe what Jews are. Because I grew up in the era where, in my era, and I have this conversation with people of my age, we grew up being told and learning that Jews were a race.
Mm.
That is not the popular understanding of Jewishness anymore. So then, the next thing was, well, we're a tribe. That's one way to say it. We're a people. We're bound together by tradition, like all these different things. And this woman said, she said, you can argue about all that stuff, but before all that, before the Romans, before any of this stuff, there was Am Yisrael, the
Hmm.
term Am Yisrael, which was the
Right.
sort of a collective understanding of what Jewish people were as a global community. Which I thought, oh yeah, I think I remember that. The people of Israel. That's okay. That's a different thing. But the people of Israel who also didn't all live in Israel,
Right.
and had no desire to go back to the homeland. It's very interesting that I'm off on a tangent. I apologize, but a lot of the stuff that's going on now with uh, kicking people out of the country, and sending them back to their homeland, the place they were ostensibly from, is insane. It's as insane as expecting Jewish people to all make Aliyah and go back to their supposed homeland, our supposed homeland. Like, we live in the West, we live in Spain, we live everywhere. So I think that's the big question: is, okay, what do we do? What are we going to do with this? Uh, with that, with the diaspora that we live in? What would that look like if we just sort of allowed that to be our norm, and kind of bought into that a little bit more? But I know
Yeah.
it's too much
No, no,
politics.
no. And I think I've been uh, like you, looking at the folks from the turn of the 20th century, Zionists, Bundists, Buber, Walter Benjamin, trying to find like what is the modern soul for the Franz Rosenzweig with the Freirisch Lehrhaus, Jüdische Lehrhaus, which was like a diasporic German yeshiva for anybody, right?
Yeah,
It was like, so there's all these different energies and efforts, but I'm excited to talk to you about that, Doug. But we
yeah,
should talk about something that you're like incredibly famous for, and you've helped define something called screen dance,
yeah,
which I'm so excited to hear you talk about. And you're you really like helped shape what there it is. Look at that. That the camera right becomes this choreographic tool. Um, and Yeah, there's something about film and yeah, take us there, man. You've
yeah.
gone and you love the Black Maria films. I've heard you talk about that. I love those things too. And I
No,
teach animation, so we do like uh, kinetoscope and tomatrope things so that the students can understand persistence of motion. Right, that's always the thing that's built into it. I'm curious too. Also, like a side note, maybe for another time, if you've ever watched animated dance, if you've ever looked at any of the historic, like Japan, you mentioned you're connected to Japan. There's like the what is called the Dragon and the Panda, which was like the first film to come out of Japan
oh,
that used rotoscoping.
huh.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that particularly, but I mean, I've been around long enough to have gone through a lot of different iterations of combining dance and cameras. There was a whole kind of org- loosely organized group of people who would meet to every year or so to talk about what's called dance and technology broadly.
hmm,
So yeah, there's a lot of a lot of that. That's not my particular. I'm really interested in people and bodies with skin, real skin, and faces and stuff like that. Uh, so that's kind of where my uh, bias is. But yeah, screen dance. Uh, I mentioned that I had worked with the American Dance Festival for a long time, and um, was had a lot of support there and a lot of opportunity to try things. And I started teaching workshops in the early '80s there, or not, maybe the early '80s or mid '80s, where I would teach students or introduce them to some of these concepts about how we might think about dance in the space of the technology of recording devices, cameras, and then collecting work that I had found or come across over the years, all the way back to Black Mariah. You're right, to Edison and some of the stuff he was doing there, um, to Edward Muybridge, motion studies. Then later on to things that were kind of more purposefully dances that were captured on camera throughout history. So as long as there's been cameras, people have been pointing them at dance or bodies in motion. And yeah, I became really enamored with it. It just became my sort of my thing, I guess, at some point.
And
I
you
can't,
flashed your book earlier, right? Staring at the sky.
yeah, no, this is a different book. This is so
Oh,
I wrote a book about 15 years ago called Screendance, Inscribing the Ephemeral Image. And the reason it's sitting here is because I'm finishing a second edition of it, and I
oh, cool.
just been working on it. So 15 years later, writing new things, new things, new material, which is exciting. But yeah, when I first started being interested in this idea, there were, a handful of festivals around the world. Other, the seeds were planted. People were interested in this. So we all would meet at these festivals and, talk stuff over, and, you'd make a film and it would show at all the festivals, and you'd see all your colleagues at the festivals. And then over the years, through a lot of advocacy, not just me, there's a whole group of people that got together, myself and a group of people got together to found a journal, first journal for screen dance. So was one of the first places where there's academic writing and a lot of activism and information about the field, attracted a lot of attention. And so one thing led to another, and now there's thousands of festivals all over the world. It's really kind of extraordinary. I've been touring this film, The Sea, that you mentioned, for about a year now, and it's a feature-length film that I shot in Sweden on Bergman's Island. It was very important for me. He was a real important filmmaker for me, and so I've been all over Europe. I mean, I've been everywhere with this film in festivals.
And what's the reaction been? How are folks approaching you, and what are folks saying?
Well, this particular film, I mean, I've made a lot of films leading up to this point, and prior to this film, I made two other films. I made a film with a woman named Sally Gross, who was part of the Judson Church group years ago in New York, very avant-garde group of performers and dancers. And she was the daughter of a Jewish immigrant, and I saw her work, and I was really enamored with it. And I ended up working with her, making a film in a small synagogue we have here that you can rent. And it was really a beautiful film. And she was about late 70s or so when we made that film. And I thought, I feel like I should be working with people my own age. And so after that film, I made a film in which I was the only performer in it. And it was called Song of Songs. And it was loosely fashioned around some version of the Song of Songs, the biblical version of the Song of Songs. And I just wanted to make myself sort of accountable to, what is it like to be in front of the camera I think at that point I was 65 or something like that.
And you're wearing what seems to be like a page from scripture
Oh,
around
it
you,
is. It's the text from Song of Songs. Yeah.
and you've got like a kind of reminded me of uh gosh, is it Yves Klein who would wear in the room with the wolf?
No,
You
no,
know,
no.
uh,
You're talking about Joseph Boys.
Joseph. Yes, thank you, thank you. That's
Coyote.
what I was thinking of.
It's a
I
coyote.
I at a coyote. Yes, the vibes were hitting when I was looking at the the documentation for that piece. I'm
Good film.
sorry, Doug.
No,
Sorry.
it's like,
But I dug it. I thought it was for me it felt like an entrance point. I wasn't like, oh, that's that. Like he's just. I didn't feel like that was a repeat. I felt like, oh, cool. That I get that. Like that's a kind of a portal into what you were doing.
Yeah, I've been hiding homages to Joseph Beuys in my work for years, as well as Bergman. And I mean, you know, yeah, there's something about like reaching back to the ancestors, you know. So yeah, I made that film, and then that film, I happened to then have a residency in Sweden for a month, and that film found its way to somebody who was curating a screening at the Bergman Center in Sweden, Bergman's home, where he lived on the island of Fora, and it was screened there, and I got to go there, and I thought, oh my God, I mean, this is like I'm in sacred ground here.
Wow.
And I thought I want to make a film here, and I want to make it with people who live in this men who live in this area, because what I had realized is that most of what I'd done over the years, except for the work where I was the primary person in it, I've turned the camera toward women, because that seems to be the logical thing to do if you don't think about it. And I didn't seem to be thinking about it much. Most of the dancers I knew were women, you know, all sorts of rationales, I'm sure. But I thought, you know, I've never really worked with a group of men, especially men of my age, and I was interested in. I had been doing a lot of work about sort of had something to do with my father, and something about male intimacy and masculinity and stuff like that. I've done a series of different things, not in film, but in performance and such. And so that led to finally to this film, making this film, The Sea, which is a feature-length film, which is quite unusual for dance films. It's in black and white. It has English subtitles and some Swedish language, and it really is. All these men, except for a couple, are from that island. They're untrained dancers. They're not Jewish, but they were very willing and eager to participate in this project that asked them to really think about, you know, stuff about being a man, being a male person, and why we maybe act the way we act, and what if we acted slightly differently? What might that look like in through movement?
I mean, I found the film to be like incredibly meditative. Um, there was a rhythm. Uh, I'm neurodivergent, so there was times where I felt like I should be moving, and then there was times where I felt where I should be still. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of Bergman movies, so like knowing these facts about being on the island, I guess I'm curious, Doug, if we could back up, like what is it about? Because clearly in your aesthetic, you have the black and white, you have like the kind of what do you call those, like slightly askew shots that like Bergman's famous for, filmmakers are, like where you kind of see pet. You do a lot of that too, where we flew past some people over their shoulder, um, and some silence. I mean, there's scenes that like are long format, and
Yeah,
require you to be with it and let it wash over you. This isn't MTV. It's not jumping to the
yeah.
cut the jump cuts. Yeah, unpack that a little bit.
Well, again, I'm going to be 70 in December, and as I get older, I become really conscious of a lot of things, and I think deeply about things, as much as possible. And I have been thinking about the people in my life that have shaped me, whether they knew it or not. But I used to go when I was in my 20s. One of the things I did was I would go to Berkeley, across the bridge to Berkeley, there was a movie theater there. I can't remember the name of it. I think it might have just been called the Berkeley Cinema. And you'd go there and they'd show like 3 or 4 movies every night. So you could see a Fellini film, you could see a Bergman film, you could see a Lena Wertmüller film, etc. And I just
Cool.
remember watching these things and thinking, oh my God, like what the, excuse my language, what am I looking at? Like, and it would just be mind blowing. and it really, shaped me. I mentioned Beckett, people who not film necessarily, but
Yeah, theater.
people who have these like crystal visions of something that I had never seen before. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
I was going to say there was this, especially the accordion dancing scene.
yeah, that is the only Jewish guy in the film. That's
That,
David Dorfman. He's a dear old friend of mine, choreographer,
wow.
and we danced at my wedding. And I've been thinking ever since then, 30 years. I've been thinking, I really want to make a film with David. Go ahead.
No, no, well, I love that part. I mean, the Oompa grabbed me very quickly, but
Yeah,
that felt very Fellini-like. I was like, it felt like a 8.5, you
yeah.
know. Uh, and what Bergman movies are you like excited about? Because I know he has that like little island kind of series, right? All kinds of stories, but like all connected to that kind of space of
Yeah.
islands that you were on. Which ones do you like to get into?
Well, Persona is the big one. So Persona, there's a
Yeah.
shot in my film that is shot on what's called Persona Beach. We I learned about the island. I spent a lot of time there and went around the island with people who knew this is this, this is that, and I actually stayed in the uh, in the he owns 7 houses or so on that island, one for
Wow.
each of his kids apparently. And when people come there, if it works out, you're allowed to stay in one of those houses. And I stayed in the scenes from a marriage house. So
Oh, yeah.
so the house where they shot scenes from marriage, literally like the bed is still in the room. It's just the house. That's where they shot it. So that was a thing. But yeah, the long dolly shot down the beach in Persona where the two women are running down the beach. That is Persona Beach, and if you see the last image of the film, that's the image that's shot on Persona Beach. Um, and so there were other places that other things were shot on. Uh, Other places there where things were shot. Summer of Monica was shot there. I think we're on that beach also. But yeah, it's just his work was so deep and so incredible. And I'll tell you a funny story. When I got to go into his house. So
Mm.
again, if you're lucky enough and it works out, there's a woman who lives there who's was the caretaker when he was alive, and she takes you into his house. And I'm walking around in his house, and I saw two things that caught my eye. One is I saw a signed picture on a wall of Pina Bausch. You know who Pina Bausch was?
No.
Pina Bausch, one of the most important postmodern choreographers, German, uh, intense choreographer, dance theater of Wuppertal. And by the time she died, she'd been for many years been making these dances that were 3-4 hours long. They were just incredible. No, sometimes they have intermission, sometimes not, but they were just so cinematic, but they were live. So I had a picture of her. And then I went into his library and there's a bunch of things out, books everywhere. Then there's a few books on a table that are open. And the one that I happened to see right off the bat was the book from Woody Allen, Woody Allen's autobiography,
Oh,
um, that was open to the signature page that said, you know, to Ingmar, whatever, love Woody. And I said to the woman, I said, what is this? What's going on with this? And she said, oh yeah, they were great friends. He would sit in that chair right there and have long conversations with Woody Allen on the phone. And I realized, oh, well, I grew up with Woody Allen movies, and there's those few movies that people used to call, I don't know if you remember this, people used to call them his Bergman movies. He made a
oh,
few, he made one film
like the
where,
robot when he's the robot, or
no, these
no?
are much later. He made one film, what is it called? It all takes place in a small beach house. Nobody ever goes outside. It's all in the house, and people are very dark. They're very depressed. It's very Swedish. And in the end, or in the middle maybe of the movie, the mother opens the door, walks out, and drowns herself
Oh
in the ocean.
gosh. Is it the interiors?
Yes, it's interiors. That's right. So
Oh,
he,
I've never in the Diane Keaton's in it too. Oh, I've not heard of this one.
oh my God. But Alan made a bunch of films that were inspired by Bergman. So that's a weird Jewish Bergman connection.
That's cool. Yeah, because I mean, clearly, right? Like, is there? You're talking about these like two kind of camps or tiers of Jewish art, so to speak. Do you think you being a Jewish artist, uh, what what have you discovered? Now that you're at this age and you're making movies, this isn't just a Bergman homage. You got something in here. You're talking about a little bit about a relationship with your dad, and thoughts there. What Jewish thoughts, Doug, have like
Well, I mean,
emerged in that? Yeah.
there's a couple of people who've written about the film. Um, one of them happens to be a Swedish Jewish woman who saw things in that film that most people don't see. But anything I make is going to be imbued with, and I think you would maybe say the same thing, is going to be imbued with the things that are important to me. And whether they're recognizable to everyone as what I was thinking about at the time, there's a scene. First of all, I'm going to backtrack. So I went down a rabbit hole a few years ago. Someone showed me these videos of soldiers dancing in Israel way before this thing that's going on now. These little clips of men in full battle gear, just in these bombed out, terrible places, just dancing, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I have to think about that. And I had reached out to some people there's a dance company in Israel that is all men. They're Orthodox men. Do you know this company?
Mm-mm.
I can't remember the name of them, but it'll come to me too. But it's an Orthodox male dance company, and they dance together in public spaces, in tallis, according to the laws of kashrut and everything, and it's amazing. And
Do
so
they do it like spontaneously?
no, they're
Oh,
choreographed. Yeah,
okay, okay. Because
this is
when I was
this
in
is
Jerusalem, yeah, like I got pulled into horror circle after horror circle at the
yeah,
Shook.
it's true. Well, that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
but no, these guys are this is like dance.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
yeah,
Performance. Yeah.
yeah. So there was those things, and then I started looking at, I think they were YouTube videos of these Orthodox celebrations in which men will dance and dance and dance until they see visions or fall down or whatever the case is. I'm sure you've
Oh,
seen them. The at the any simcha or wedding or whatever, there's dancing, but the women are somewhere and the men are somewhere else, and
right.
the men are they're like dervishes. I mean, it's crazy watching these guys. And I thought, God, that kind of joy, that kind of like, what do you call it? Intimacy was so striking to me, especially against my experience for the most part in synagogues and shuls, the dryness of that, of those services, in my opinion, mostly. So I got very interested. So when I'm starting to think about male intimacy and remembering, as a male, as a boy, as a child, kind of having my arms around my friends and giving them my weight and taking their weight. And I remember like things in sport where you're huddled up,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
You're playing football or something. They go, okay, huddle up. Let's go. Let's get together here. Let's talk it over. And how those things sort of go away as we get older, especially as men. I can only speak for myself, but as we get older, we are less and less inclined to be intimate, with our friends for the most part.
Sure. I can't remember the last time I was like, let's get in a huddle. It's
Yeah, right, exactly.
been a minute.
So that was sort of the basis for building this project, and we workshopped with the men and talked about the things that I've been talking about with you. And they, with the exception of 2 people out of 16, 2 of the men were very upset. They thought this is not what men do. They said this is not what men do. They got very upset and they left on the first
Mm.
day. Everyone else stayed and kind of went there. And so yeah, so then inside of the film, there's a lot of things that you might recognize. Some people might recognize. So there's a scene where all the men are sitting around a table, kind of a weather-beaten table outside of a shack, and their hands
Oh,
give way to a loaf of bread.
oh yeah. And they all share and
Right.
cheers. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's, none of them are Jewish. None of them I never mentioned this to any of them, but we, same family I mentioned earlier, retired professor, we have Shabbat with them often, and they're in their 80s, and I would notice that they would do this thing where, we do the blessings, they would tear the bread, they would pass it around. Nobody would say anything until everybody had eaten their bite of challah. And I
Mm.
thought, I don't know what that is. What is that? And I asked Bob, and he said, I don't know. That's just how we did it. That's how we grew up doing it. So that was interesting to me. So I put that in the film, not
Mm.
because it's Jewish, but because it's beautiful. You know. So yeah, there's a lot of the foot stomping, the kind of dance that's going on there is all very pedestrian. The kind of foot stomping huddle forms. Um, that there's in the very beginning of the film, there's 2 shots. There's one of the men going across uh, a hill,
Yeah,
and
the ridge,
they're
right.
holding hands, dancing together. Looks very Fiddler on the Roof, maybe. It's actually almost direct copy of the last scene in Bergman's Seventh Seal,
Oh, wow.
called The Dance of Death in Seventh Seal.
Oh man. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Oh, I gotta go look and see that. All right, I'm gonna do a little. That's cool. That's
Yeah,
a really cool
and then
Afikomen.
yeah, yeah, and then as it goes on, you see there's a shot from above where the men break the huddle and they kind of circle out
I
again.
saw, yeah, in the village that yeah, those drone shots were beautiful.
Thank you, but
Bergman would have been jealous of
I
the
know, it's the horror. I mean, that's how every horror dissipates, right?
right,
You start off in a
right.
circle, you end up in a snake.
That's
So
right. And then they put the dessert out and it breaks up.
yeah, yeah, all those things, are in there for me.
Mm, mm.
Um,
See, you put them right at the line, Doug, which is super interesting, right? It's like they're there if you ask, right? It's
sure.
like that's why I brought up that kind of identity, and I'm not saying this is you, right? Like, but that kind of mirrors metaphorically a lot of Jewish experience in the West, right? Which is like you don't have the outward signals, but if you ask, like, yeah, it's there, right? Which seems to be like a comfortable disposition, right? So like, yeah, and here's the problem for me though, right? Is like I'm sitting here going, all right, I want to learn a Jewish lesson from a Jewish artist. And I'm trying to get one, right? And you've got ones that like are very universal, right? Which are fantastic, like beautiful. Uh, and I can't resolve like what is it about Sweden that's so Jewish, right? Or that attracts you that like, I guess that aesthetic is you and Woody were like obsessed with Bergman in this way.
Well, so so I'm gonna, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm gonna, uh, how can I say this? I'm just gonna tell you a couple things
Sure.
that to me, uh, kind of make me think in conversations like this. Well, uh, you know, uh, how to say it exactly? Um, how, how Jewish is too Jewish? How Jewish is enough Jewish, etc. So I go to Sweden. Uh, I'm doing this residency, and I'm working in a little apartment and stuff, and the host lines up all these things. Just, I've got this thing for you. There's a it's called what's it called? Judiska something. Judiska, can't remember the name of it. It's a house, a huset, Utica Huset. It's the Jewish house. What's the Jewish house? Well, it's a Jewish culture place. It's these people, this group of people are kind of organized. They have this space. They bring in speakers. They have conversations about Jewishness. People give poetry readings, whatever the case is. So in Sweden now. So in Sweden, where the number of Jewish people is like minuscule, and lots of them have been stabbed. So it's really not a place that's inviting, I guess. They have one synagogue in the place I was. So they said, they want you to give a talk about your work and show some. They want to show you. I made a film with Anna Halpern. I don't know if you know who Anna Halpern is. Choreographer, Jewish, came to the West Coast after going to my university, actually, in the 40s. Very famous choreographer and Jewish, and sometimes recognizably so in her work, sometimes not. But at any rate, I made a film with her a long time ago. It was called My Grandfather Dances. And in the film, she's telling a story about dancing with her grandfather. It's really beautiful. So they want me to show that one, and they wanted me to show Song of Songs. So I went there and I showed the films. Afterwards, this guy walks up. I see him walking up towards me, and he's, he looks familiar to me. And I'm thinking, how do I know this guy? He's wearing jeans and a t-shirt maybe, and just looks like this guy I should know, curly hair. And he starts talking to me, and it's perfect English. And I think, okay. And I said, well, where are you from? Like, if you feel really familiar, he goes, I'm from New York. And I said, oh, what are you doing in Sweden? He said, well, I've been here for 40 years. Because I said, why? And he said, well, during the Vietnam War, I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I was a conscientious objector. Oh, well, that's pretty Jewish. When I was in high school, I got a draft card. My mom took me down and registered me as a conscientious objector, right? So we started talking about that, and I said, well, what is it about Sweden that, like, there's some vibe I'm getting? I don't know what it is. He goes, well, here's why I stayed. He said, Sweden hasn't been to war in 500 years.
Oh,
I thought, how was it even possible? And what would that be like? Like, I have grown up my whole life. There's been war. My father, like, walked out of synagogue during the 1967 war. My father walked out of synagogue the day that the rabbi stood up and said, all of you have to send your children to fight for Israel the minute they turn 18. And my dad said, fuck you. Because I just got back from the Second World War. Are you crazy? So that was that. But anyway, so I'm talking to this guy, and I'm thinking, wow, so that means that you don't have this parade of broken men coming back from war, raising their male children, or their female, but their male children, to be like them. And then those children go up to be men, and then they go to war, and then they come back, and then they raise their children in that trauma. I said, that's astonishing. What would life be like? Like, then I realized, oh, it would be like this. Sweden's not a perfect place, but it's very different, So all that happened when I was in Sweden. And I thought, well, I think I want to do this project here, I lost the question a long time ago. I'm sorry, but things like that. This choreographer, Anna Halpern, who was so influential and so much her own version of a West Coast Jew from Chicago, Oh, the other thing I was going to say. So if in my house right now, it smells like pickles because every year I make pickles. I grow cucumbers, and then I make pickles from my grandmother's recipe. And I make them, every year like clockwork, and they're in the crock right now. So, those kind of rituals, those things that we do, I have a ketubah on my wall, but to get that ketubah, we had to go to a Reconstructionist rabbi, to marry my wife and I, because she's not Jewish. And then I have a book on my bookshelf somewhere there called "The Jew and the Lotus," which is all about the relationship between Jews and people of Asian descent, and how and why that is works, both biblically and otherwise. So there's all these things that make us who we are. And this discussion that we're having, for me, is really gratifying, because these are the discussions that animate me.
And me too. I respect, Doug, so many of the great things that you've done, and your opinions. You put so much stuff out there. I can't help but look in your direction for for wisdom and just reflection. As you've gone through so many of these great things and experiences. But I have taken up so much of your day.
Good. I'm fine.
And this is going to be a long running episode, but it's going to be such a great conversation. And I think, Doug, I'm hope you feel the same way. I'd love to continue this, some of our rabbit holes and some other avenues. You've given me such a great reading list. I am starting a Jewish futurist Beit Midrash reading group, which might be fun if you're interested.
I'm interested.
Excellent. It sounds like you've got your own wonderful contributions to what will probably be like a massive list, that we'll put out.
I have to just out myself and say, while you were describing that, the first thing that came into my head was the Woody Allen line from one of his movies about I wouldn't want to be a member of any group that would have me as a member, which I think was Groucho Marx, but Woody Allen he copped it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely a Marx.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, but I don't think so.
No. Yeah. Well, I'll share the episodes with you so you can enjoy them, and geek out with us on Jewish art history and things like that. But man, it's been so cool to chat with you today. Thanks for just letting us go down all these things, and you just we opened up your brain and your memory, and you shared some really great gems. So
I'm always feel very grateful when anybody wants to listen to anything I have to say. If I'm just going to say one more thing. If you want to, you're more than welcome to link to those issues of the AJS publication if people are interested in reading those.
Yes, I would be happy to put I'll put all the things that you're connected to, sure. Place people can see your movie, screenings, like any place they can get a schedule. And then, Doug, is there anything coming up? Like, are you going to be doing another leg of your circuit, festival circuit, or?
Well, it's unannounced yet, but I will send you the information. It's going to be screened at the San Francisco International Dance Film Festival in November, which is where I'm from, which is, big deal for me. And then other things here and there, but yeah.
Oh man. Well, I hope you win. That'd be such a great thing to have a homecoming and then a victory, right? With a great piece. Well, Doug, thanks you again. This has been just fantastic, and we will be in touch for future discussions, my friend. You are not off the hook.
No, listen, seriously, reach out anytime. I'm super grateful for you and for your friendship.
Indeed, my friend. Likewise.
All right.
You have been listening to the Jewish Futurism Lab with Mike Wirth, a weekly independent production of Mike Wirth Art Incorporated. You can connect with the show at jewishfuturismlab.com, and we're on all of your favorite podcast platforms. We'd love for you to subscribe, comment, and leave a review so other seekers can find the show too. New episodes come out Friday mornings East Coast time. And if you or someone you know is a Jewish futurist doing fascinating work, message me on Instagram. I'm at Mike Wirth, Wirth. Until next time, Keep imagining, keep questioning, and keep building. I'll see you in the future.